This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Did the Ravens just get a free pass on this whole Justin Tucker situation? This is something I've held my tongue on because I wanted to see how it's played out. Now that we are weeks, months almost, after the Ravens released Justin Tucker with a very odd statement declaring that the only reason they cut him was for football reasons. And then we'll have that conversation in just a minute. I can now look at this Ravens situation and really evaluate whether they got a free pass. And the reason we want to evaluate this is because a lot of Browns fans, including myself, feel like the Browns fans got a really rough deal when it came to how we were talked about and treated because the team we root for decided to make a decision that, you know, ethically was pretty dubious, right? And trading for and giving a contract extension to Deshaun Watson. Now, I don't want to make this a flame war and make the mistake of saying, hey, look, my team's just as bad or as morally questionable as your team, so don't you feel stupid? That's not the point in this video. The point of this video is to point out some larger trends that are bigger than any individual team when it comes to football teams and who they select to play for it, so we can have a more productive conversation the next time. And unfortunately, it does feel like it's inevitable until another situation pops up like this. We can have a more productive conversation about what individual teams' roles are in this and what the role of the NFL is in allowing for these things and these conversations and these choices to be made for fans to have to deal with the brunt of the impact of it. Because that's my issue with all of this is, I'll get to that in a minute, but we'll talk about the similarities, right? I don't want to go off on a tangent too early in this video. But what are the similarities between Justin Tucker's situation and Deshaun Watson's situation? Well, the similarities are obvious, right? Both of these gentlemen are dealing with multiple allegations of sexual assault while being massaged, right? Like multiple, I think Justin Tucker has 9 cases. They also drafted Mike Green, who has a case of, it's either domestic violence or sexual assault. It's somewhere along those lines. Somebody please put the correct charge for Mike Green in the comment section below. But nonetheless, not only are the nature of these cases similar, where we're talking about sexual harassment, sexual assault, the way in which both these players got in this trouble is also pretty remarkably similar, right? Which brings the obvious parallels between Deshaun Watson and Justin Tucker. Now, there's another role in this which can't be ignored, which is that Justin Tucker is white and Deshaun Watson is black, and that's a whole other conversation to have. But it does play a role in how people talk about it and the loaded nature of this conversation, no matter who's bringing it up, because it usually serves to have a larger argument about something in society in a whole. I'm not going to do that in this video. That is not the scope of this video. I'm not going to break down the larger injustices of the world today. We're just going to talk about football, right? And how this relates to how we talk about football. Now, there are some differences between these two cases, and I'm not going to go into the details of these cases themselves. That's, again, not in the scope of this channel. I am not a lawyer, not doing that. But the differences in why this case might be perceived a little bit differently than the Deshaun Watson one. One, Justin Tucker plays kicker. Deshaun Watson plays quarterback. Massive difference, right? The kicker is not as important as the quarterback. The kicker is not as high profile as the quarterback. The kicker does not get marketed as much as the quarterback. Now, in Justin Tucker's case, it is a special kicker because he's a bit of a superstar at the kicker position. So while I would agree that like it's not really fair to compare how people would react if like let's say this was like Tyler Badgett or somebody like that who had this pop up. Obviously, that's not going to command the spotlight because he's not even a notable kicker, right? Or like somebody like that. But with Justin Tucker, it is a little bit different. Because, yes, he's just a kicker, but he's not just a kicker. He's one of the most popular players in the NFL. He's a household name for anybody who's been moderately interested in NFL football for about a decade now. So the idea that, like, Justin Tucker's not a interesting name that anybody's going to talk about, that's why this conversation hasn't been had, I don't think is justified, right, when it comes to Justin Tucker. Now, the big difference isn't the level of fame that they had. Deshaun was more popular than Justin Tucker, but Justin Tucker is kind of, was kind of placed as NFL royalty at that point. So the prestige that they held within this apparatus that is the NFL are similar. But the big difference is the money. Nobody knows how much money Justin Tucker makes. Everybody know how much money Deshaun Watson makes. $230 million guaranteed, right? And that's because the Browns gave him the largest guaranteed contract in NFL history after he was accused of all of the things he was accused of. They gave up 3 first-round picks. They gave up $230 million guaranteed. And I understand why the criticism is a lot louder for the Cleveland Browns than it would be for the Baltimore Ravens. That's not what I'm sitting here and noticing and why I'm saying the Ravens got a free pass. I'm saying the criticism is largely not existent for the Baltimore Ravens over this Justin Tucker situation. Yes, people might have made a post or two about this and said, oh, the Ravens are a problem for doing this. But the long-standing, consistent criticism of how the Ravens have operated, the fact that there is not a larger question being had about the Ravens' involvement in the fact that this has come out late when it apparently happened 10 years ago, that were they involved in covering this up? The lack of interest in covering any of that is why I'm saying the Ravens are getting a free pass. And I'm not saying the Ravens need to be prosecuted or anything like that, but if this is something that, people were suggesting the NFL should care more about, and I agree with those folks when they were talking about the Browns and Deshaun Watson, that the NFL should care more about these things, should be more harsh about these things. Well, then why aren't they demanding that the NFL investigate the Baltimore Ravens about if they knew about these allegations with Justin Tucker? Because the way that this has been portrayed is that a lot of people in the city of Baltimore knew that Justin Tucker was doing weird stuff with massage therapist in the city. Like, that had been an open secret. So, like, the question is asked, like, were the Baltimore Ravens involved in covering this up? The same way the Houston Texans were involved in covering up whatever Deshaun Watson was getting into while he was a quarterback at the Houston Texans? This goes to a bigger issue, right? Because we could split hairs and say, oh, your organization is more disgusting than my organization. And the fact is that any NFL team, if they're given the opportunity to do something they think improves the team, will morally compromise themselves. It is up to the NFL itself, which is tough because the NFL is governed by the people who run the teams, to determine who can play and what's acceptable for an NFL player. They could make it so that a charge like this puts you on an exempt list, so no team really has the chance to make a trade for you, sign you to a $230 million contract, or, do whatever. But the NFL is not intent on that. The NFL has no interest in doing that. While they may act like they have interest in a variety of social causes, the reality is that the NFL, they don't care, right? If somebody has off the field issues, but it doesn't affect the bag and it doesn't affect how good the team is, then they're going to care very little about whatever that off the field issue is. And that's my point. We should not spend our time pointing at individual teams because, yes, are they morally compromised? Of course. But acting as if your team is immune to this, right? I saw a lot of this coming from from like Buffalo fans during this whole thing. Like, oh, we would never do such a morally compromising thing. If you were desperate at quarterback, y'all would have been one of them teams trying to take Deshaun Watson off the Houston Texans' hands too, right? Every single one of these teams, all 32 teams, are morally compromised in some way. You can point to the rosters of all 32 of these teams, find an example of a time that they decided to compromise their morals for what they thought would make them better on the football team. If we dig for enough dirt for all 32 teams, including your favorite team, we're going to find some stuff there that we are uncomfortable with. That is the absolute truth about the NFL. And the reason that's allowed to exist is because the NFL thinks that that existing is appropriate. I tend to think that this is short-sighted, that they're putting fans in an awful position when they aren't very strict about what they allow to go on behind closed doors with their players. If they want the NFL to have this sparkling, shiny relationship and have all their players be approved to be role models for children like the NFL seems intent on doing, right? They want to make this a family-oriented product where you can buy your kids a jersey of this player and have the trust that that player is not going to do anything that morally compromises you or the team. Then the NFL needs to be more strict about how they operate as far as who can play in the league, what's acceptable for a player to be charged of, and what the process is for players who are charged of, quite frankly, heinous stuff. At some point, the NFL has to make the decision whether they're going to prioritize the quality of football that a team could play or the quality of image that they want to have. That's really it. Right? Until the NFL makes a decision on that, all 32 teams, all 32 fan bases are going to be put in a situation where they look like assholes. Because no matter how much of a team swears to you that we're going to draft good guys and we're going to take good people, if a bad dude runs 4-1 and he's super cheap to sign, they going to sign the dude with the bad reputation because they're trying to win football games. And unless the NFL says, hey, look, I understand we're all trying to win football games, but we can't do this, then teams are going to do this, right? And that's up to the NFL. If you're mad that Deshaun Watson got a $230 million contract, yes, you could be mad at Jimmy Haslam for doing it. But honestly, you need to be just as upset at Roger Goodell and the NFL owners, all 32 of them, for saying, yeah, I guess it's acceptable that a guy dealing with these charges can be allowed in the current CBA to sign a $230 million contract or to be able to barter themselves to a new team the way that Deshaun Watson was able to do it. Pointing the finger at other teams and acting like you're more morally righteous because you cheer for a team that don't got something crazy going on at the moment, that stuff is a distraction, right? If you want this to change, if you want to stop being in a position, maybe you're a fan, maybe you personally are a fan and a survivor of sexual assault or sexual abuse or domestic violence, or you're a fan and a friend of a survivor of one of those things, and you don't want your team to put you in a position where you have to justify these decisions that they're making in order to be entertained on a Sunday or have to overlook it, then yelling and finger wagging at individual teams or individual fan bases is not going to get you there. What will get you there is if we point this outrage at the NFL owners, all 32 of them, because those are the people who allow you to be put in this position because they believe that that's profitable for them. So did the Ravens get a free pass? Yes, the Ravens got a free pass on this whole Justin Tucker thing. The statement they released on him getting fired was ridiculous. And some people tried to justify this to me by saying, well, the Ravens couldn't just get rid of him because of the accusations. They would have got sued for wrongful termination. That's true, but the Ravens didn't have to also leave a press release talking about how great of a player Justin Tucker was for them for them and why, they're only getting rid of them because they drafted a kicker. They didn't have to do that, right? If they just cut Justin Tucker, we understand how the NFL goes. They drafted a kicker, they cut him. That's normal. You wouldn't win a wrongful termination lawsuit given those circumstances, as far as I understand of the law. The Ravens put out that press release for a more sinister reason, which is they fully intend on preserving Justin Tucker's status as a legend, right? They want to preserve the ability to be able to market Justin Tucker to Ravens fans. They want to preserve the image of Justin Tucker so they can bring him back and include him in Alumni Day and do a Justin Tucker bobblehead day so you can be enticed to show up for a Ravens game. Maybe if the Ravens aren't good one season, right? They want to preserve the legend of Justin Tucker, to preserve his monetary value as something that they can market to you as a fan. That's why they released that statement. That's why they made it clear that it was about football. So when they bring him back and retire his jersey and then sell a limited, retirement edition of his jersey, they can justify it by saying he only got cut because he wasn't good enough anymore. The cases had nothing to do with it. And again, I asked this question. He was openly doing this stuff for about 10 years in Baltimore. Has anybody asked if the Baltimore Ravens were complicit in covering this up? Is there any investigation from the NFL on the Baltimore Ravens about their role in covering up this alleged spree of sexual harassment and assault from Justin Tucker? That's why I think they got off here. That's why I think they got a free pass. Not because people weren't as mean to Baltimore as they were to Cleveland, but I think in general, not only do the Ravens get a free pass here, the NFL gets a free pass here. Because if somebody wanted to sign Justin Tucker tomorrow, they would be able to do it. The NFL would not stop them. The NFL would say, hey, we're not going to allow that because that's just not appropriate. We got to have some standard here about what we want to deal with as far as the conversations about our league. But the NFL is not going to do that. The NFL is not going to stand in the way of the Ravens trying to preserve Justin Tucker's legacy, because the NFL is ran by, in part, one of 32, the people who own the Baltimore Ravens. So the next time a situation pops up like this, and again, unfortunately, there will be a next time. Think about that. Think about who's really responsible. Think about who really allows these things to happen. And don't just stop at pointing the finger at another team or another team's fan base. Go deeper than that. Where does it really go? Because I, for one, am tired of every time this happens, Raven fans go to Falcon fans and say, oh, look, you're a dirty organization. You guys are immoral. When the fact is that all of these organizations are immoral. And that's the reason why these things can happen, is because all 32 of these owners allow for it to happen. And maybe there should be more pressure on everybody to fix this situation. Because I know a lot of people who would love for the NFL to be a little bit more picky about who they let play so it can be more comfortable for people to root for the team. Now, some people might be on the other side of that. Maybe people are like, hey, it's only about football. I don't care what charges anybody has. You should be able to work in football if that's your specialty. That's a whole nother argument to have, and honestly not one I'm going to have on this channel. But as far as like people who are actually concerned about having to root for a team that might have some dubious characters on it, the solution isn't finger wagging at teams that sign these guys in the moment that they do it. The solution is, hey, man, all 32 teams allow this to happen because they all want the best players possible and they don't really care about anything else that comes with it. And unless the NFL decides they don't want to do that anymore and they want to be more selective, then that's going to continue to happen. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.